Hi guys, so today I'm coming to you with a top 10 list of the things that I would change about X-Wing if I were to redesign it. So top 10 things that I would do differently if it were up to me. Of course it's not, but I think we all kind of have our wish lists, right? So with that being said, let's get started. Coming in at number 10 is movable parts. So some of my favorite ships in this game have movable parts. And I really like, the TIE Striker, the Lambda shuttle, for example, the Epsilon, or Upsilon rather. It's always really cool when pieces move. I think it sets more thematics for the game and it feels much, much cooler. It's a shame, however, that certain ones that really should move don't. And this is more apparent in earlier ships like the X-Wing, for example. You should be able to lock the S-foils in attack position as you're moving closer to the enemy, not necessarily start with them in attack position because you're too far away. So it would be so cool if you could, close them and open them from the get-go, although it would be kind of hard for them to do that now. Same thing with B-Wings. B-Wings have the same thing. They're not designed that way. And if you're doing movable parts, I would also suggest some kind of movable, system where they can, so the B-Wings, you don't have to mod it in order to have it fly sideways like it should. Like have that just be something that you can do from the get-go. So basically just kind of designing the ships with a little bit more detail, even if it made them cost an extra buck or two, I think would be worth it. So that's my number 10. Number 9 would be to have more different types of dice. So the reason for this is because we've seen I guess there's some design changes or command decisions, that kind of philosophies that got changed as the game has grown. And having more dice types might have helped alleviate that. For example, like the HWK having a 1-die primary. I think if you had different types of dice, you could potentially make more ships stronger without totally changing their stats. For example, if you wanted TIE interceptors to have way more, survivability than they do right now, maybe you would give them 6 dice, but that would seem way overpowered. So instead of just 6 evade dice, maybe you give them 3, super evade dice, right? And so instead of green, you have like a light green die that has a chance at a double evade, whereas how the hit has a crit, maybe you can get like a critical evade, which is actually 2 evade symbols or something like that. So different colors of dice that represent some of the best, then it opens up a whole new world of upgrades. It's like maybe one upgrade is like when you attack, you can replace, before you roll your dice, you can replace one of them with a super attack die, and that one has maybe only 1 blank on it, or maybe it has 2 crits, or maybe it has a side that has a double crit, or something like that. But we're basically from the philosophy of the game to allow and accommodate more die types. Doesn't mean you have to start the game with all of them in play, but certainly having that be kind of a design step. I would love to see more die types, because that would to me, that would seem more fun. And it also allows you to go the other way and have weaker die types. So if you wanted to bring in a really old ship, like a Clone Wars era ship that just doesn't have the firepower as modern ships, well, maybe you can say, okay, well, it's got a whole bunch of, Legion has white dice, right, that hardly have any hits on them. But maybe you can roll a whole lot of them, so you're still getting the fun factor of rolling a whole fistful of dice. Oh, I got 1 hit, something like that. I would just basically allow for more different dice types. And that's my number 9. Number 8 would be to have more expendable options. So when I say expendable, I'm thinking not specifically ordnance, but cards that you have to make a choice on the fly. This is something that I feel Armada borrowed, Armada implemented really well from, and X-Wing started to borrow from that with things like Crackshot, and upgrades like that are awesome. I love saying, do I want to use this now, or do I want to save it for later? I'm only going to get to use it once. So I really like upgrades like that, but I would have that be more of a thing. Less permanent upgrades that work all the time, and more upgrades that force you to make a decision, because for one, it makes the game a little more strategic, but also it gives you, I think maybe more fun, because you can potentially put more more very, very powerful upgrades out there if they're only going to be 1 use. So maybe an upgrade that gives you like 3 extra attack dice on a single attack, costs 10 points, but is only 1 shot for the whole game. Not that specifically, I haven't play tested that, but you know, it's just this idea of having more, you know, like one-time use options. You know, like I'm gonna use my ultimate weapon, you know, the Death Blossom or something like that. Would be kind of cool for one-time stuff. Not always that stuff. Typically, I would have them be much more reasonably powerful. You know, normal things like, okay, you can get one extra focus, boom, one time, you know, per game, you're done. You know, and this way you wouldn't have to have like upgrades that cost 8-10 points all over the place. But I would have more stuff like Crack Shot as just a fundamental part of the game. You'd see a lot more things like that. And I would like that, just more decisions to make, because that's one of the things I really like in Armada is that you don't roll defense dice. You have to make choices. Do I want to use this now and risk losing it, or do I want to save it and just take the extra damage? So there's, you know, that type of decision making. I would have more of that in X-Wing. Number 7, borrowing a page from that a little bit, as I would redesigned Ordnance a little bit more. Ordnance, I think, like torpedoes and missiles, were a complete failure in this game for a long time, and they're starting to get better because some of them now are starting to become better, but the most iconic, like the proton torpedo, is pretty much trash, right? I mean, there's cases where it can work, but it just doesn't compare to, you know, like, oh, this is a 4-dice attack, but I have to have a target lock and spend the target lock to even shoot it, and then I have nothing to modify my dice. So in order to make it work, I have to have synergy to give myself maybe push the limit, so I, you know, or have natural rerolls built in already just to make a, you know, but when there's other ships that have a 4-dice attack primary, it's just, you know, it's just not that great. So I would have designed Ordnance to be far more powerful, you know, and maybe Ordnance, maybe we would have Ordnance dice. You know, I'm going back into how I was saying have different dice. Maybe Ordnance would have their own types of dice altogether, and that's what would make them so devastating, is that they had much higher chance to get criticals. Maybe they had only one blank on the Ordnance dice or something like that, and just make them. I would make them also more expensive. So, you know, oh, there's an X-Wing, but oh, here's an X-Wing with a proton torpedo. All of a sudden, that X-Wing is like way more deadly, as opposed to like when this game came out, like an X-Wing with a proton torpedo wasn't that big of a deal because, well, he can just get you at range 1 and roll the exact same attack. And by the way, he can, you know, he can spend his target lock to reroll dice. So, you know, I would do something like that. I would redesign Ordnance from the ground up. And make even the worst Ordnance, you know, or I should say even the lower powered Ordnance a significant threat and nothing that you want to take lightly. My number 6 is I would include atmospheric combat from the design phase. Now, this isn't really that much of a change as far as mechanics, but more about a change in terms of, like, I guess the theme. Because one of the things is 2 ships I think that should be in this game that aren't, because it's a space game, are, you know, the speeders, like the snow speeder, and the cloud car. And even though I would argue that there's probably ways to make them work in space, at least the cloud car, maybe the speeder. I'm not gonna get too into speculation on what kind of mods they could put on it, but those things are very, you know, very iconic. And we're seeing so many battles that take place in atmosphere now, between Star Wars Battlefront and between The Force Awakens, and you know, in Star Wars Rebels, you even see a lot of battles that take place in atmosphere. So you can have battles that are like, you know, in low altitude, you know, over. You can use a playmat that's like a forest or ice or desert or whatever. Like you're flying over, like in like Jakku, you know, doing a battle like that, and have crashed ships down below, and you're flying above them. I would basically have that be an acceptable, you know, way to fly. Not to be confused with my long-standing theory that I want a ground version of X-Wing. I think that would be kind of separate, because as you evolved into Epic, you could have also evolved into ground Epic and had a whole separate rule set for that with stationary units, maybe turrets, and, you know, granted, I know Legion's kind of taking over all of that, but because the scale of Legion is so big, the minis are so big, I don't know if we'll be able to get an AT-AT Walker in Legion, and I'm like, well, crap, X-Wing would have been a great size to have those, because you can have multiple. But I digress. I would include certain iconic ships that we, you know, probably deserve to see, like cloud cars and snow speeders. So you basically have atmospheric stuff be a capability. Whether or not it's a separate rule set for, atmospheric combat or in space combat remains to be seen, but I wouldn't rule those things out. I mean, why don't we have cloud cars already, you know? My number 5 is, we're getting into the good stuff now. Number 5 is I would do more specific ship names. And this basically helps you control certain things that I think were kind of out of control. For example, the X-Wing should have never just been called X-Wing. Of course, at the time they made this game, they probably didn't know there was going to be T-70 X-Wings, but it should have been T-65. Like, everything should have as much detail as possible, because then when you want to do a title or a modification or restrict something to a ship, you don't have to worry about, oh, well, this one says X-Wing, this one also has X-Wing in it. I would have, everything should have been T-65B Incom X-Wing fighter. And this way you have a whole lot of different stuff, because maybe you want to do an upgrade for the X-Wing and the E-Wing, and you can say Incom fighters only, and anything that has Incom in it, or whatever. I would just put as much detail in there as possible, because it just gives you more options. You can still restrict, you can change your upgrades. This is restricted to T-65 X-Wing, B-Wing, etc., but it also prevents you from having stuff filter out. And this is kind of like the same problem we had with the TIE Advanced prototype and the TIE Advanced, and why they had to, put the little dot in there in ADV, because if the TIE Advanced simply, had a full nomenclature and a model number, or TIE Advanced X1 model, XYZ, forgive me, I don't have all the, the exact details for, what the serial number was, but if you had more detail there, you wouldn't have had to worry about title confusion. Same thing with the TIE Aggressor and IG-88's Aggressor. If IG-88's Aggressor was Aggressor IG ship or something like that, then your title could have had the full thing. And when a title is only meant for one ship, it needs to have the whole thing every time. So basically more detail in the ship names to prevent confusion, constant FAQs, rules lawyering, and also balance reasons too, because now you don't have to worry about, oh, well, we can't make this because it's going to boost both ships, etc. My number 4 would be to have more crew types. So instead of just having crew, I would have at least 2 crew types, maybe more than that, but I think 2 would be good enough for now. And the idea is I would have a technical crew and a general crew. And they would have different icons, so they would look different enough. But the idea is that a technical crew is a crew member who does something on board the ship, whether it's a gunner, tail gunner, a technician, a bombardier, somebody who's assisting in a technical manner. And then your general crew are those people who are on board the ship that they're not doing anything, like the Emperor, for example. Emperor Palpatine, he's not sitting there manning the guns and be like, I'll help you fly the ship. No, he's just sitting there and be like, yes, you're motivated by my presence. And that could be like a lot of the dignitaries and a lot of the people that you want to see in the game. Like, a lot of people argue for, they want a Yoda card, and we were like, well, that's not thematic. Well, Yoda's just presence aboard a ship is going to motivate you. Like Obi-Wan on board the Millennium Falcon was just, he's just an inspiring presence, right? So just having certain people on a ship, Leia Organa, for example, she would be a general crew because she's, helping your whole fleet, where she's not being technical. Granted, and you could have multiple versions too. You could have a technical crew Leia, where she does sit at the controls and help out, and maybe in that case she's going to offer a different benefit than she does in her role as a commander or something like that. So a general crew is more of your Mon Mothma, your General Riken, your Emperor Palpatine, your Piet, even your Darth Vader. And you can have 2 versions of Darth Vader. You can have Vader who sits back and is like, I'm gonna let you guys handle this, but you screw up and I'll kill you. Or the other Darth Vader who's like, stand aside, I'm taking the controls, which is very more thematic from him in like the books, because he's definitely the type who's like, I don't trust you to fly me, especially when the Emperor is on board. I'm flying. You just go watch the readout, so you get the heck out of here. That's so it kind of gives you more options for thematics, and it really allows you. People say, oh, we need Thrawn in a game like this. Well, like, Thrawn isn't going to just pilot a TIE, but he could be a general crew, and it gives you more options. And it also stops you. It allows you to have like a ship like, oh, well, we don't want the Emperor going on board, like a TIE bomber or whatever. Now you don't have to restrict by point cost. You can say, all right, only technical crew can go on this one. For example, Y-Wings. A lot of people wanted Y-Wings to be able to have crew. Well, that might, there's certain things that might throw it out of whack. Well, now you can, if you restrict it, if you only give it a technical crew slot, you don't have to worry about Mon Mothma flying in a Y-wing. Although you can specifically allow that, and that could be a kind of a cool upgrade too. Is like, all right, we'll swap out the technical crew on the ship with a general crew, and it just gives you more control, and also allows for better thematics. My number 3 change I would make is I would make all turrets into a mobile firing arc. So that's basically when the mobile firing arc was introduced, I think a lot of us said that's how turrets should have been all along. So I would do that from the beginning. You wouldn't have any, it would be very, very rare for a ship just to be able to fire everywhere. I don't think there's a single ship I want to be able to do that at the moment, unless it's some crew of gunners. Like maybe the Falcon, if it has a technical crew of like super gunner, allows you just to fire everywhere, because like the idea is, all right, Han's covering this arc, Chewie's driving, covering that arc, and Luke's down here covering that arc, or something like that. But I would basically give every turret, even the ships with the turret upgrade, I'd give them the little slider so you can do the mobile firing arc, and and that might be good. It would probably require any ship that has either a primary weapon turret or a regular turret to have the 4-way printed on there. But that's totally fine. I have no problem with that at all. It's that's great. So I would definitely do that. And as a matter of fact, you could even go so far as to just print all 4 quadrants on every single ship base, because it also allows you to say, oh, if you're directly behind somebody in their rear arc, even if those ships can't shoot out of the rear arc, maybe you can. It gives you a whole new option for tactics, and it's like if you get right behind somebody. Of course, you kind of have outmaneuver and stuff like that with now if you're outside of somebody's firing arc, but it wouldn't really hurt much to print a 4-way arc on everything, except it might confuse some people. At a minimum, though, I would give all of the turret-capable ships basically the mobile firing arc. Number 2 is I would scale ship power better based on the cannon and where they're supposed to be. It's been a long-standing gripe of me and a lot of folks that I know that ships that came out at the end of that we saw at the end of the Galactic Civil War are the least powerful ships. The X-Wing, for example, shouldn't be, one of the weakest ships in the game, or the T-65 X-Wing. The TIE Interceptor shouldn't be one of the worst Imperial ships. I know some of you guys love the TIE Interceptor, and I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't, but it should be way more survivable than it is right now. And so the problem is that it's a good problem to have, and I understand it. Is that this game came out and I was like, all right, we got to do all the ships that everybody knows and loves. Whereas realistically, it would have made sense for ships like the ARC 170, which is a Clone Wars era ship. It shouldn't be better than the X-Wing. I understand, and as far as it's a refitted, it's got the Rebellion refit, but X-Wing should be the most, one of the most powerful Rebel ships. And I'm fine with ships like the E-Wing being more powerful than the X-Wing, and of course they can be cost reflective of that. But the B-Wing, for example, is my favorite ship. You see it in Return of the Jedi, and it's only prototyping during Rebels, so it's not even in full-scale production yet. Throughout the trilogy, the original trilogy, until the last movie. Well, crap! The B-Wing should be way better than it is right now in the game, and that's because it came out years and years ago, and so all this new stuff has come out, and they're kind of gone backwards. They started off with the most recent stuff, and then they've worked their way back. And so I would find a way to make sure that the stuff that comes out in the core set, if it's going to be an X-Wing, then it needs to be the best ship. And maybe newer ships that come out are just cheaper, and that's why maybe you want to basically work on balance better and make sure that the canon of these ships kind of reflects them, because the best ships in the game shouldn't also be the ships that have been around for 50 to 100 years. And the number 1 thing that I would change about this game is to have pilots as upgrades. There's just no good reason to have a million pieces of cardboard that you have to track and store and run around with. It's just absurd. It's absolutely absurd, and it makes storing this game incredibly difficult. I think it's just almost a complete nightmare how difficult it is to store all of the stuff. I have a whole tackle box that is filled mostly with cardboard, and it's just so frustrating. Armada totally got this right, because Armada has one piece of cardboard for every ship, with the exception of the the Imperial Star Destroyer, which has a whole new version coming out, and that's understandable. But that's just it. You should have just one X-wing base, and then you have a pilot upgrade, and every ship gets a pilot upgrade. Every ship can take that, just like a modification. Every ship can take that. And that's what determines the pilot skill. And that's what determines everything else. Because you don't have ships, I guess there's only one ship, and that's the original Millennium Falcon, where there was a difference in the pilots. And that's, you know, we would scrap that from the get-go too. We would make all ships the same. The pilots can change the pilot skill, and the pilots add the pilot ability. We don't need all that other stuff. And I know this has been suggested lots of times before by folks, and that's why it's my number one. It makes the most sense. I have got way too much cardboard, and it's just killing me. And I think that would actually be better for everybody, because then it's less weight in the boxes. It's easier to manufacture this stuff. You don't have to print out a dozen more sheets of cardboard per wave. You don't have to ship, you know, all this extra cardboard to everybody. People don't have to store all this extra cardboard for everybody. Everybody wins if we just had pilot upgrades. That's my top 10 list of things I would do differently if we were ever going to redesign X-Wing, or if I had a time machine and can go back in the past. If you know Doctor Who or anybody who has a time machine, send them my way. We'll go back, you know, we'll fix X-Wing from the get-go, and we'll come back here and be like, why did he make this video? X-Wing's perfect. That's exactly what he described. So if you know them, let me know. If you like this video, leave me a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what you would do, what you would change if it's not on my list. What would be one of your top things that you would change about X-Wing? Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.